Are we not there? Oh, we are live. Yes. So, hello everyone, and welcome to this week's healing conversation. My name is Einav, Untitled Coaching, and with me today, Dinara Munk. Welcome, Dinara.
Thank
Please,
you so much. I'm excited to
right.
be here.
So, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so hi everyone. My name is Dinara and I am a women's health coach and I help women restore their hormone balance and heal their guts, ditch medication naturally through lifestyle, through movement, through nutrition. And I specifically work with women because specifically for women within reproductive years, I look through the lens of our reproductive system, so through our menstrual cycle, and how different our bodies is, how much they change, and I help women to use the wisdom of the menstrual cycle, bringing it into their everyday life and matching it with their nutrition, movement, so that way they feel like they live in alignment with their body and they just feeling good, feeling best in their bodies.
Actually, amazing topic. Actually, it's recently, we all heard about the cycle and everything, but more recently, I came across some women that actually didn't realize that there's more to the cycle than just the cycle. And this alignment that you're talking about, recognizing at what time of the cycle you may be more active, maybe more, time to calm down a little bit, or how to use it to your advantage, it seems to be still a little bit of a hidden secret.
Absolutely. It's like the way I came about it, and when I discovered it, it just felt like, how come it's been hidden from me the entire life? How come this is not something that I've been taught in school? Because the way that we sort of the way they understand the menstrual cycle was to sort of see the menstrual cycle and we see the period. But your menstrual cycle is so much more than just presence and absence of your period. And there's
Mm.
this actually a whole other almost over 3 weeks of things that happen within our bodies, specifically how our hormones ebb and flow, and the sort of associated how our brain changes, how our focus changes, how our desire to be social, desire to be alone, how our appetite changes, basically the entire how our body and experience of living and experience how we experience life actually fluctuates quite dramatically depending where we're at in our cycle. And the way we're taught in school about our menstrual cycle is more like, this is your period, try not to get pregnant, here's a condom, this is the banana. And like, it's a very, the sex ed education is very limited,
Mm.
as opposed to teaching it in this like, in the way where it actually benefits women, rather than just like, here, deal with your period, as opposed to like embrace it and welcome this beautiful event on a monthly basis.
Mm. And so how did you come about it?
Yeah, great question. So my story sort of began in my early 20s. I'm in my 30s now, and I used to have debilitatingly painful periods. And this particular date in November that stood out in 2000, I don't actually remember the year, but it was in my early 20s. I woke up with just incredible pain in my lower stomach, and I actually thought that my appendix has ruptured. And I was like, I'm about to pass out. The pain is so bad. I need to call an ambulance. So the ambulance arrived to my house, and I thought that they were going to take me in for operation. But what actually happened is they said that, no, it's not a big deal. Your appendix is intact and it's just your period cramps. And I'm like, are you joking? And then they basically given me some really strong pain medication and sort of got me on my way, sort of saying that you should feel blessed because some women suffer with it for way longer than 1 or 2 days. For some women, it can last for up to 7 to 10 days. And I'm like, all right, well, that's I guess that was meant to make me feel good, but it was just such a crazy thing that this is it was presented in a way that being a woman is kind of like having a diagnosis, that because you're a woman you're going to have to suffer with these things. And of
Mm.
course, we've been culturally conditioned not necessarily talk about our periods and accept the fact that the pain and the discomfort associated with it is quite normal. So when I talk to my mom and when I talk to my grandparents, they would say this is just normal, painful periods just run in our family. And I
Mm.
think so many women sort of live with that notion when it's actually not true. Painful periods are very common, but it's not normal. You shouldn't be um, crippled in, calling an ambulance like I did, or just completely isolating from the world and losing days of productivity to the pain. There
Mm.
is, when you sort of understand how your body works, you nurture it in a way that supports your body, you move it in the way that supports your body at a different time within your cycle, the pain actually disappears and so does the discomfort. And you sort of just you more like float through life, and it becomes so much less painful. So I discovered I didn't know all of that. So I actually ended up going to the doctors, tried to heal my pain. And then the doctor put me on a birth control pill, which didn't do well for my body. Birth control may work for some, for others, it may cause a lot of side effects. And the way
Mm.
that it works, it basically shuts down the communication between our brain and our ovaries. And when you shut down a major system in a female body, like a reproductive system, naturally you're going to have side effects. And a lot of side effects associated with it are like, there's been a study done in Copenhagen that showed that up to 56% of women experience anxiety and depression once they're on birth control pill, as well as low libido, just low energy, change of personality, just feeling like you're not in your own body, you just don't feel like your normal self, and all of
Mm.
those things I've experienced. That's why I decided to come off of it. And then going back to the doctors asking for different solution, I was offered another birth control pill, and I'm like, no, I don't want to do this. And then sort of lived with it for a while and decided to get to the bottom of it myself. And that's when I discovered this beautiful cycle and what happens with it. And I was almost sort of infuriated that I never really knew that about my body.
Mm.
And once I began to abide by it, all of my health issues disappeared. At the time, I had an extra weight gain that I just couldn't lose, and through that, the weight melted off. My brain fog disappeared. I've become more focused, and I began to eat more and exercise less, and actually lose weight because I was supporting my body right through nutritional standpoint. And then as I began talking to other people about it, other women about it specifically, they were like, I've never heard about this.
Mm.
And I was like, okay, there's something in it. And at the time I was actually living in London and working for a large company. And I left the organization and started my own business. And that sort of brought me here. And I also got quite passionate about it. And in November recently, I did a TED Talk based in Vancouver here, where I spoke about menstrual cycle as our superpower. So I can
Mm.
sort of bring this information specific to any woman, but also to younger women as well, just so they have this, because we're so impressionable as young women. Like we need, if we educate it right, we'll learn this for the rest of our lives, sort of thing. So that's what I do now.
No, that is amazing. And actually, I didn't know that. I didn't know that you can get over the pain with managing the cycle, like you say, if you by movement and nutrition and all of that. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Because I mean, I have a couple of friends that yeah, when they have the period, it's like they're out and out for
Yeah.
they have to rest, they have to lie down. It's a whole days that are just passing by, and it's like it's nuts.
Yeah. And I think sort of to answer that question, we'll go back to what hormones actually are, because it's dictated by what happens within our hormones. And whenever we experience the pain, it's a simple sign of hormonal imbalance. Like a couple of your hormones are not necessarily working in the way, not necessarily working. So our hormones are more like the chemical messengers within our body, and its entire job is to sort of run from different glands within our body to the tissues, through the bloodstream, to deliver the messages. So they're kind of like a software of our hardware of our bodies. They literally run the program. So they go from like from our hypothalamus, which is typically it's kind of like the head center command where all of the directions get released. Then it goes to pituitary gland within our brain. Then we've got our thyroid, we've got our pancreas, we've got adrenal glands, we've got our ovaries. So all of those major glands within our body, they're called the endocrine system. So they all release glands and they send messages to each other. So they're like, hey, speed up the metabolism because we need to metabolize this food. Release an egg so that the body can ovulate. Increase body temperature. So just increase focus, reduce energy because the person is sick, and that's why we usually tend to have lower energy. So they're kind of like, they're not good, they're not bad, they're very neutral, they're just messengers. And and they also release in a particular amount. So your hormones can be too high, they can be too low. They should be just sort of at a perfect amount, and that's what we call a balanced hormones. When there's too much of something, we begin to feel them as symptoms. So there's three major hormones that play specifically within reproductive years for females, and that's estrogen, testosterone, and progesterone. So if we look at our cycle entirety altogether, during our period, typically this is the time when all of our hormones fall, and that triggers the uterine lining to shed, and that's when we have the period. Post our period, we begin to have the hormone called estrogen that slowly begins to rise in our bodies. And it's estrogen for women is an incredibly important hormone in the sense that it's our growth hormone. It's the hormone that gives us kind of like this va-va-voom feeling. It makes us very confident. It's a growth hormone. So it allows the uterine lining to build up. But for women, it also allowed us to sort of grow our lady humps because it's responsible for growth, and it builds up the uterine lining throughout our bodies. So then when we get to our ovulation, which is like ovulation is kind of like the start of our menstrual cycle. So the woman, when she ovulates, then her body either goes into preparing for pregnancy, or that unfertilized egg will become a period down the road. So then we have our ovulation, and we also have another hormone that released at that time. It's called testosterone. And testosterone is the hormone that usually associated with like a hunky man, but it's actually for women, it's very important. And usually it surges during ovulation. And this is the time when it makes us very confident, outgoing. So it's sort of in the right amount, it does just that. And then in the second half of our cycle, post ovulation, we begin to release this third hormone called progesterone. Progesterone basically means progestation. So it's sort of our pregnancy hormone, if you will, but it's responsible for keeping us calm, for keeping our nervous system calmer. And it's also meant to sort of protect our uterine lining in case the egg was to fertilize. So if you go further into pregnancy, it'll continue to grow. If not, about a sort of week before your period, the hormones get to the level where it triggers the uterine lining to shed, and then it becomes a period. But as this progesterone hormone in the second half rises, we also have the estrogen hormone on top, and they're meant to sort of kind of like yin and yang. They're meant to be in a perfect balance. But what often happens, we have excess level of estrogen in our bodies for a lot of women, because estrogen it's one of those hormones that can also be absorbed through environment. Like a lot of some of our chemicals and products that we use can have things called xenoestrogens. So the foreign estrogens, the way that they mimic in our bodies, they sort of mimic our natural hormones. Sometimes the foods that we're eating, a lot of processed foods, sometimes the sugars and so on that create inflammation can create further sort of disruption between the progesterone and estrogen hormones. And it's sort of this gap in between them two is usually called estrogen dominance, which is the imbalance of this hormone that usually causes a lot of painful periods, causes a lot of PMS, and a lot of discomfort associated with our cycle. And in order to bring it sort of into balance, you can absolutely do it through lifestyle by eating the right things to help metabolize excess estrogen hormone out of your system. So one of the because hopefully that didn't confuse people that were listening to the hormonal language, especially if you're not used to it. But if you do curious more about it, please do message me in detail. But I'll sort of give a general explanation as to why the periods are so painful. So as our uterine lining sort of builds, we have this little elements. They're called prostaglandins, and they can cause a lot of inflammation in our body. And whenever whenever we experience the period, as the uterine lining sheds, the growth hormone estrogen may have built up sort of thicker lining within our body. So as it comes down, that's when it usually tends to cause a lot of pain. Sort of a little bit of discomfort is all right, but you shouldn't be needing medication. You sort of just need the water bottles. So one of the best things that women can do is to basically support themselves through nutritional value, and it's eat a lot of stuff that's anti-inflammatory. So things that cause inflammation are ultra processed foods, and ultra processed foods are usually foods that have ingredients that we don't have in nature. So all of the ingredients that starts with OSE, or like stuff that's just so long that you can't read, that's usually ultra processed. Anything that's excess added sugars are ultra processed foods. A lot of white grains and white breads can sometimes cause inflammation for some women, depending on the body. So in order to reduce the pain, we just gotta implement more sort of less inflammatory diets. And some of the best ones for women is actually Mediterranean diet, which includes a lot of healthy lean proteins, nuts, kidney beans, and sort of the mix of it all. But yeah, so in the short of it, the pain causes usually by the hormone imbalance in combination with inflammation within our bodies.
That's so interesting. It is really so interesting because, like the women I was talking about earlier, they just say, okay, medication, and I have to lie down, I have to rest, and it's so interesting that actually when you understand a little bit more about that, I can't claim that I understood all of these. I understood
Yeah.
a little bit more than I did
Yeah.
before. But it's so interesting that, yes, that once you understand all of these things, you can start planning, and you know the phases, and you know what you should do when. And it sounds so much, well, I like it so much more than, yeah, taking a pill and, being subjected to this cycle. And what it is, and what you're saying is that you don't only have to not do that, you can actually use
Yeah.
it to utilize it in your life.
No, absolutely. And I think I'll sort of describe the menstrual cycle of a woman in more simpler terms and how I think we should have been taught it in school. So when we look, we as women, like we're quite seasonal in nature. We're very cyclical, we're very rhythmical. Our cycle matches the moon. So it's very like we have a lot of the synergies within the female body. So our hormones fluctuate on about 28-ish day basis, anytime between 24 to 35 is considered to be normal, and it matches your cycle. And this rhythm, this female rhythm, kicks in at puberty and it sort of stops at menopause. And when we look at it from the seasonality standpoint, we as women also go through 4 different seasons throughout our cycle. So our period is actually our inner winter. This is the time where women feel a bit lower energy. This is a good time to sort of take a break and actually allow your body to restore as it begins the new cycle. Once your period ends, after that, for about 7 to 10 days, they enter follicular phase, and that's considered our inner spring. This is the time when women usually notice after period they just have all this energy. They're like, oh my gosh, finally. And it's associated with the fluctuating hormone running in the background, but it sort of feels like the spring in your body. You're like coming out alive, you're excited. Usually it's a great time to establish new habits, build in new routines. You become very creative. I actually have a brainstorming folder on my phone where I've always just put in the ideas because it just keeps coming up to me, specifically in the shower, just because there's something with flowing water down. You usually get loads of ideas. And
Mm.
after our ovulation time is considered to be our inner summer. In um, Chinese medicine, they call it our inner hot season. So we sort of want to counterbalance that hot season with like cooling foods, more berries, and like eating more fresher stuff. And that our inner summer is usually where we're most outgoing. Naturally, sort of, I guess genetically standpoint, this is the time when it's our fertility window. So naturally, we've given with this kind of like God-given confidence. Like in the summer, we want to be out, we want to talk to people, we want to communicate. At the same time, our communication channels are, from the cognitive standpoint, we're better at communicating. So I usually tell women to schedule either dates or meeting up with girlfriends, going to see your in-laws, even having difficult conversation with your partner or boss or whatever you're able to do, just because you'll be so much better at expressing yourself, just sort of
Mm.
playing to your strengths. And then as you go into your inner fall, it's called the luteal phase, and it goes from past your ovulation and takes you all the way to your period. And that's our inner fall. So this is the time when if you've thrown your inner summer and inner spring, you've been having this outward energy. When you go into your inner fall and in the winter, you become more inner energy. So women switch from being very outgoing to kind of wanting to do more things on their own, more like focused, more internal, more deep work, because we just hormonally we're more able to do those sort of things. And it's also the time when it's the fall time, it's also a good way to support yourself through nutrition, through kind of like fall foods, anything that's root vegetables, anything more hearty, anything that allows you to that will sort of stews, anything warming. So
Mm.
for me specifically, kind of to give women a bit of an example as to how it implements in your daily life, when I was preparing for the TED talk that I mentioned earlier, I've implemented all of the 4 phases. So my inner spring was the time when I like just had all these ideas, and I was just writing them down, they're coming in on paper. Then during my ovulatory phase, during my inner summer, this is the time, because this is the time when we're prone to better communication. I was doing a lot of interviews. I was asking people for their feedback on the speech that I have written, that made up through sort of the brainstorming of the powers of the spring, I guess. And then as I went into my luteal phase, I've become more internal. So all of these ideas that I had, I could actually sit down and do a lot of focused work and do actually like work on the stuff a little bit better and bring it closer to the end, sort of And I'd have the energy to, and I'd have the desire to work more so on my own, whether
Mm.
within my inner summer and inner spring. I just know I can't be at home, like just have so much energy, I need to be out. And then your out period is actually a really good time to evaluate and see what worked, what didn't. That sixth sense, it really kicks in during menstruation for many women. And from the cognitive standpoint, they've done brain scans where they showed that the left and the right hemisphere of your brain tends to communicate the most with each other,
Mm.
meaning that our logicals and our emotional sort of the closer with each other. So I tend to do a lot of intuition meditations, or if I have any sort of unresolved things in my life, this is the time when I usually sort of go into my body. And it's that inner voice, whether you want to believe it or not, that usually tends to come through like, this is right. You almost get a bit more realistic with some of your plans, because like there's half of the season where you're just dreaming, you're like in this amazing dreamland, and then there's a half of the season where you're a bit more like, I kind of like, I need to be going in and like thinking about this a bit more. Is it actually working? So it's just this beautiful flow of energy that happens with women on the course of 29 days. So the interesting part is men also go through hormonal fluctuations in a very similar manner, but their hormones fluctuate on a 24-hour basis. So their inner winter happens when they sleep. They only have two hormones at play, which is cortisol and testosterone. So their inner winter happens when they sleep at night, they sort of cocooning, and then their inner spring kicks in at about 6 o'clock in the morning and takes them till about 11, 12. So when we look at the corporate clock, a lot of important meetings that happen between that time, as well as men can get up at 6 o'clock in the morning every single day, some of them, and just go crush the workouts, and like the 5 a.m. club, all of those books that encourage us to do the same things all day, every day. It
Mm.
doesn't work for women. It works for at this particular time, but it doesn't work at other, like in the second half of our cycle. So then men's inner spring takes them till about 11, 11, 12. So from about 12 to 5, this is where their inner summer kicks in. They're a bit more communicative, which is a lot of the times when we have our happy hours scheduled. Like this is when you go and communicate. And then their inner fall sort of kicks in around 6, 7 o'clock, where they're more interested sort of just sitting on the couch, watching Netflix and like cooling off and then going off again. So the same way, 24 hours. So doing things the same way for men works, like following a diet regime, doing keto, doing intermittent fasting, working out hit like crazy. It like they're very cyclical as far as 24 hours. For women, doing this non-stop in 24 hours, it burns us out. A lot of
Mm.
the times it involves in this self-blaming, self-shaming, and it just doesn't necessarily, it doesn't benefit our body. That's why 85% of women have some sort of hormonal imbalances. Women are 50% more burned out than men, because a lot of, at the same time, a lot of our project management things like Trello, Asana, all of the productivity tools have been made by men. So it's like there isn't a lot of stuff that talks about women's productivity and how our energy changes, which is why
Mm.
I'm so passionate about this work, because once I switched to that way, I've still accomplished things. For women, it's not about what accomplishing. We're just as powerful. I think we're more powerful, but I'm biased, than men. It's for us not what we need to do, but when. We need to, like, our timing works slightly different.
But it
Yeah,
sounds to
that's
me like it's like the key to to the kingdom, right? It's like
right.
when you understand as you described the cycles and when we are more active and as you described all the seasons, you plan your life according to that, right? It's not just the nutrition, but it's also as you said, if I have a meeting or if I you know so I guess when you did your TED talk, you probably tried to do it in your summer, right? Rather than
Exactly.
before
Actually,
the.
no, interestingly enough, my TED Talk fell into my winter, which was really annoying. And because the TED Talk is scheduled at a particular day. And I think this is the beauty, and that women should understand that the life is not going to always perfectly fit into the times that it needs to fit in, just because not realistic.
Yeah.
But if you do things that are like completely out of the season, which women do all the time, fitting in, and that's why they're exhausted, but having being aware of this information, you can manage it a bit more. So because it fell in right into my winter, and I was like, damn it, like this is not what needed to happen. But when that happens, it's okay. Basically what you need to do is just be kinder to yourself. If you have to do something as big as like a TED talk or big presentation, or you have a deadline, do it, but at the same time take more frequent breaks, knowing that this is the time when you need to be retreating. This is the time. Inner winter for men is when they sleep. For us, we don't work like that. Like we need we do need to sleep because we've got the circadian rhythm, but our period is our cocooning. So if
Yes.
you do have big events during your period, just taking, knowing that as soon as that's done, maybe you're going to go and have more Epsom bath. Maybe you'll do a longer meditation. Maybe you go for longer walks. Maybe you'll take more frequent breaks, but being very gentle with yourself. And if it does happen, just compensating by having a bit extra time and more like playing with it. But as far as scheduling your day, like my Google Calendar is exactly colored in when each of my phases is, so I'm able to plug in activities.
Sounds amazing.
Mm.
So I have another question. Actually, I've got a few more questions, but I'll start with so now, people listening or people viewing, watching the replay and all of that, the women, they will understand more about the cycles and how to plan for it, and everything that you've just spoken about. How should they communicate that to the partners? Or, because I think one thing that women don't really like is when men say, "Oh, it's your time of the month," and I
Yes.
think
Yeah.
yeah, don't say that. But how should this communication be, and what should men do, and what should they notice? So how is that conversation? What is your advice around this conversation?
Yeah, and after my TED talk, there's the amount of men that came up to me. It was more men than women that came up to me and were like, "Oh my gosh, like this is so like I wish I knew this." So it helps me understand my wife so much better. And this whole like your period this time of your month, it's a very culturally conditioned sort of thing that we have. We almost have this bias towards women that they do experience this way. And a lot of the times because women like we don't enjoy it whenever we've got experienced this hormone imbalance and we do feel a bit like this. We know that we're already irritable, so don't tell me that like I'm actually gonna get crazier. So I think for men and just like for women, having the knowledge and understanding and awareness of their bodies and then communicating that to their partners, and I think one of the beautiful ways to present it and it'll resonate with many people is through seasons and being like, this is my winter, I need a bit more support, and like it would be really nice if you did this. And now I'm in my spring. My language at home has changed with my partner because we communicate in the seasons, and he's always like, okay, Dinara is in her spring, or she's in her summer, or she's in her winter. Like it's actually a very playful way of communicating, and it creates this deeper understanding and just kind of gives you an extra layer. And whenever I
Mm.
work with women one on one, I either create like a little sort of a fridge magnet for them, especially if they have kids. So that way, and I draw usually like the summer, the different season, and I allow the moms to kind of move the magnet of where they at. So they create this conversation with their children, with their families as well. And then now, like some of the women that I would work with, they'd send me messages and being like, "Oh my gosh, my husband comes up to me and is like, you must be in your period, like you might be needing extra cuddles and stuff." So it can be such a beautiful way of truly appreciating the female body if we only were able to talk about it. But I think there's such a big bias around the women's health, and there's not a lot of information that
Mm.
we just don't have the language to speak it. So that's why we're not able to express ourselves. So we just express ourselves the best that we know. I'm pissed off, I'm on my period. So that's kind of the language that's acceptable because we heard it so many times. But actually, instead of that, explaining the seasons and explaining what you go through, so the communication becomes so much more transparent and interesting. And I think the big thing for men is to understand that the most challenging time is for us later fall and early and our winter. And what we need most is just cuddles, maybe some chocolate, preferably 70% chocolate, something just like giving us a bit more time. Those are probably the top three things that I'd recommend doing for your wife or your partner. Should be blown
Mm.
away. How do you know?
But I think it's you know, also through this conversation, which revealed a lot of things I didn't know before for myself. You know, like if I'm thinking about the friends that I have that they're in so much pain, I think their tolerance level is very, very low anyway. So if someone then
Yeah.
comes along and really demands things that they are not able to actually accommodate with the way that they're feeling, then I definitely understand that. And I really agree with what you're saying. When you educate people to think in this way with the cycles and the seasons, it does become, it takes away a lot of the prejudice and the and the inability to actually talk about it, because
Yeah.
this is who we are, right? It's not a shame, it's not a problem. It's,
No, it's a
this is
beautiful
part
thing.
of yes. So I really like that it encourages conversations in a different way. Um,
Hmm.
so another question I have is, so we spoke about women's and their seasons, the women in that age that have,
Hmm.
reproductive age, and we talk about men and their seasons. What about women in menopause and, beyond the age of reproduction?
Totally. I was hoping you would ask that question because I think a lot of the people, and I notice it more because I give quite a few presentations, and actually a lot of women are like, it's not applicable to me. But actually, it is, and there's a slightly different way of looking at it. So the perimenopause is actually starts as early as 35 for many women. This is when our cycles become to get shorter or longer. They become a bit inconsistent. So it will vary, but for some women it can begin as early as 35, and that's not abnormal. That's absolutely normal. And this perimenopause can take you 10 years of like switching different what happens within your cycle, going smaller, longer, and experiencing a lot of symptoms. And after those 10 years, then you go into menopause as you have your last menses, your last period, and if you go into the into menopause. So during menopause, the biggest thing that happens is that your ovaries no longer produce this estrogen hormone, so you no longer have this like you no longer be releasing eggs. And then if you don't ovulate, you're no longer producing the second hormone called progesterone, because it's only produced upon ovulation. So your hormones sort of like they level out a little bit. So given that some women crave that cyclicality and they want to still be able to do different things and feel their energy, a lot of women, and this might sound a bit woo woo, and I realize it. So if you jive with it, great. If you don't, that's all right as well. So some women that within my practice, they implement cycling with the moon. So the moon has a 29-day cycle. So there is a full moon, which is usually would be known as your inner summer. The way to remember it is the full moon lights up the sky. And back in the days, many women used to like go out and sort of like party and create full moon celebrations because you had more light outside. And then the new moon would be your inner winter, because it gets darker and you sort of get a bit more inside and just not necessarily spending as much time inside. And then you sort of in the middle, the waning and waxing mood would be on either side, will be inner fall or inner spring. And it goes for about a week each. So because we as women we're so cyclical, many and every single phase of our cycle, winter, summer, spring, summer, fall, and winter, require different nutrition, require different movement. It's good to cycle those sort of things anyway for women, just because like during inner spring it's better to have slightly sauteed vegetables, more lighter stuff, so because it's lighter for your digestion. During summer it's nicer to have fresher foods. During fall it's better to have soups. And during winter, for women in reproductive years, since we lose a lot of blood, it's good for us to replenish it with iron and with minerals. So for any woman, it would be good to do the cyclical of nutrition, because it'll give you a whole spectrum of vitamins and nutrition. So you can do it with the moon. And I've actually presented to I was doing this presentation to a group of real estate women, and then they all walked in, and I'm about to present on periods, and they were all in menopause. And I was like, this is going to be interesting. And how are we going to? So, but at first they're like, oh, this doesn't apply to me. Thank goodness my period is behind me, which kind of shows the cultural thing that we believe that the period is this horrible event. But then as I began talking to them about the moon, and they were not woo woo at all, by the end of the presentation, they were all downloading the moon calendars, because you can actually have it on your phone, and they're like, oh my goodness, I can't wait to cycle it this way. So you absolutely can bring in the cyclical changes through the moon and allow you to still have the variety of movement ranges and a variety of nutrition ranges. But as far as like, I actually have a lot of clients in menopause and going through perimenopause, and when I finish my TED talk, they've asked, will I'll do the talk on menopause. And I was like, sure, maybe down the road, we'll see. But for women, it's very similar, because the diet that it needs for reproductive years of these different nutritions for different times, it's the same thing that needed for women in menopause and perimenopause. I had women that used to have 6 hot flashes a day, and by switching the diet, by changing it to cleaner products, by reducing the inflammatory stuff from her diet, her hot flashes disappeared. And we haven't had one in, like, now we've been working for 3-4 months. It's just not a thing anymore. And I know for many women that's one of the sort of symptoms that bother them, as well as the mood naturally just feeling more exhausted during more tired or more moody sort of during perimenopause and menopause. That's again because of fluctuations of hormones. And once we change the nutritional standpoint and add a bit of movement and specifically stress management, those symptoms, for some they alleviate completely, for some they just get so much easier to manage. I have many women that come to me and say, I'm thinking of going on hormone replacement therapy, but let me try one more time the holistic solution. And I'm like, great idea, let's do that. And when we implement that, they notice that all of their symptoms disappear, just because if you never had a knowledge of your body in your reproductive years, you're going to bring it into menopause, and then you're going to experience all of this sort of similar collection of symptoms, but on a whole new level. So once you learn to support your body in more in a way that that is beneficial to it, giving it all like scope of nutrients that it needs, and giving the movement and taking the stress seriously, it'll do the same thing sort of to your body. You'll also feel better, you'll have more energy. Like woman that came to me with hormone replacement therapy, the last she came to me no energy, she's like, I'm a different person, and she just ran a marathon like yesterday. She completely just flipped her life, and it's just, I'm amazed on a daily basis just to see the power of nutrition and lifestyle changes that can be done with women regardless of which age you're at.
Fascinating. And one question, so you obviously talking about the seasons and also the
Yeah.
moon. So it's very much, it sounds very predictable. What about women that say, actually, the period is so irregular, and sometimes it takes, it lasts months, and sometimes it lasts days, and they never know when it's coming or how it's going to behave. uh, I have a feeling you're going to tell me that once you start sorting out the nutrition and and the activities, that can change. But please tell us.
Absolutely. You're definitely right. No, that's exactly what I'll say. Because so I'll give you sort of, for those of you within reproductive years, or somebody that's suffering with it, I'll give you the sort of the normal range. So your cycle from the time that your period begins until the next cycle starts should be anywhere between 25 to 35 days. It's okay if it fluctuates a little bit, but it shouldn't be like one cycle, it's 25 days, then it's 40 days, then it's 50 days, then it's 10 days. Like that large of a fluctuation should not happen. If it's within a couple of days, it's sort of all right, which is why cycle tracking, and there's so many apps for cycle tracking that are available. Like one of the ones that I use is Clue. It's actually based in the UK, and everything that you put in there goes into women's health research, which is all of the data, because different companies do different things with data, but I know Clue is for sure uses it for research. So definitely plug that in so you know the length of your cycle for those of you within reproductive years. And if your period should last anywhere between 5 to 7 days. If it goes longer and it's very heavy, I would definitely go to your doctor, and I would try to sort out what could be the underlying issues. If it goes between or more than 35 days and you're seeing 40, 50 days, then it could be indicating a condition called PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome, and it affects about 1 in 8 women. So it's actually quite common for women, and it's usually happens because the most common reason is because of insulin resistance. So because we have too much glucose in our bodies. And this is kind of the conversation around sugar, because sugar has been used to be like that. We had to run to the savannas, get a bit of berries, and just be super happy. But now we have sugar in such a large abundant amount in every single ingredient, which is when reading ingredients becomes very important, and watching the added sugars. So if your period goes for much longer, it is possible that your body is insulin resistant, because the hormones sort of play off each other. If you're insulin resistant, it'll affect other hormones within your bodies. It'll begin to affect progesterone, it'll begin to affect your ovulation, and that's sort of the reason why it happens. So finding the root cause of the reason why this happens, which is what I work with women within my practice, is whatever they come to me with, we're not just like what happened with me, my story with my periods. I had a painful period and was placed on birth control. Birth control does not address painful periods, but my periods came back and they were still painful, but now I had all these other crazy emotions. Unfortunately, too many times when we go to the doctors, they treat the disease. So they're like, oh, I'm gonna give you a pill. let's just stop it, and we just put a band-aid on a solution, yes, it might
Mm.
regulate your period because it stops your ovulation so you can control things more. But for many women, it might just cause a lot of side effects and then not really heal the issue, which happened with me. So
Mm.
for you, the most important thing when you go to the doctor is get to the bottom of why it's happening. Is it because your glucose levels are too high? Is it because the insulin levels are too high? Why is your period so heavy and why do they go for so long? It should not be like, there shouldn't be crazy irregularities. So definitely see your doctor. If you have further questions or just need a bit of guidance how to even talk to your doctor, reach out to me and I'm happy to sort of give you the guidance based on whatever happens in your life.
Mm. I think it's so important because I know we always, right, we go to the doctor and whatever they say we say, oh, okay, which I didn't know that, and now, okay, thank you for the advice, thank you for the peel, or whatever it is. But actually, so often the real cause is obviously is not found, and the peels are
Mm-hmm.
doing something completely different, and we end
Totally.
up in this limbo thinking, actually, I don't feel that this was a solution, I don't know what to ask, I don't know what to do. And then it's like, it's I don't know, I keep hearing this from so many different people. So I think, anyone listening and maybe wanting to get in touch for your help and advice, I think that would be very well. That's incredible,
Yeah.
really.
No, absolutely. And I think there's still a lot of bias about women's health in within the medical field, unfortunately. And too often when you come to the doctor, they usually ask you a question, do you want to get pregnant or not? And if you want to get pregnant, you're gonna go on like a ton of tests. And it's like, is it as in like women's body is just there to reproduce, which is
Mm,
like, yes, that is one of the big reasons. But for some women, they just want to feel good. And then if you don't want to get pregnant, then you immediately go into this like bucket of here's the birth control pill and it'll solve all of your problems. And but if you do want to get pregnant, obviously you're going to go through this comprehensive testing. So it's just that very interesting sort of line. There are doctors, of course, that do like that they examine things slightly differently and go a little bit deeper, and like that's amazing. But in my experience, both in the UK and in Canada, you go in and you have 10-minute limit and only one issue. But like, and it also treat our body as it's isolated parts. Like if you've got hormone problems, they're going to go to endocrinologists. If you've got stomach problem, it's gastroenterologist. It's like it's different people. When our bodies is connected, actually they play off of each other in a very like in synced way. So once you fix one thing, the rest of them will get better. But if you begin to put pills into one thing, the rest of them also are going to get affected. So it's sort of like it needs to be looked as a holistic body as opposed to
yeah,
body parts, which is what a lot of the times tends to happen.
yeah, and it's
Mm.
a yeah, it's really it's such a fascinating topic, and I'm really glad that you explained this to me and to anyone who happened
Yeah.
to watch.
No, definitely. But like the amount of, this is one of the biggest things, I guess, for women and in general, is just never underestimate the power of what you put into your body. Like your digestive system, your whatever you put into your body is how it breaks down, gives you vitamins, and either allows your body to thrive or you just survive. You're just gonna go from one thing to the next. And time and again, like working with clients, I just see that they're just like, oh, I can't believe that the food, like, I just can't believe how I feel. Like it's such a like, I think we just often think that food is not as powerful, but our body has this innate wisdom, and once we help it, once we support it with the nutrients, we give it stuff that it needs by simply listening to it. But I think we've been so disconnected from listening, because when you go and look at like magazine shelves, it's like keto, intermittent fasting, like it's a very like, don't listen to your body, let's force this, let's force that. And I think it's not as bad in Europe. It's really like this in Americas and in Canada. And
Mm,
I'm looking for, that's one of the reasons I'm relocating to France in a couple of months, and I'm excited to be in the country that has this appreciation for food. That's just because my partner is French, and like actually through him I've realized the power of food, because he was treating ingredients in a way that's like, oh, this is incredible, as opposed to in Americas or like even in London, with the hustle and bustle, you just shove the food, you don't even enjoy the taste, you don't connect with it, you're always in a rush, and naturally your body is going to like, it'll echo it back. It'll be like,
mm,
okay, I'm exhausted. So it's all so connected, and that's why, and I think that's why it's such a beautiful thing.
yes.
Mm.
Yes, very, very, very. I agree with. It's very interesting, and I'm really happy that you helped, like I said, me and everyone else
Yeah.
to understand a little bit more about this nutrition and how it's connected to everything, to women, to cycles, to men, to their cycles, and I mean, I know that with nutrition, with all the supplements and stuff that we have at the moment, it's also a big, you know. Oh, I didn't actually even realize it. I was talking with my mum the other day, and she's like, she needs to take some vitamin C, and she was like, "Do I take it every day? Do I take it just a little bit, in the week?" And all of these questions that actually we don't even know that we need to ask, right? But
Hmm.
we can't just assume that because it's a vitamin, it's a good thing. And
Totally.
that's what I'm saying. You go to the doctor and you say, you ask a question because you don't know what to ask. You don't really understand what the answer is. And
Yeah.
then, so people like you really understand all of this, bigger picture of nutrition and stuff. It's so helpful and so needed.
Yeah. And I love that you bring in supplements. And the thing with supplements is you can't out supplement a bad diet. Like if your nutrition, if you're continuously eating I call it beige food, like fries and like deep fried and that kind of stuff, and then you try to take a handful of pills, you're not going to feel good. Like it's just our body doesn't absorb things from pills as it does from foods and from natural sources. And often vitamins area and like supplement area is so big at the store, but sometimes some of this stuff is like chalk. It's not even, it's like kind of
Mm.
works as a placebo and it doesn't actually help. And I've spoke to women that like vitamin B is so important, so that they take these vitamins that like give them this vitamin B, and then they have this like overdose of vitamin B in their bodies, and it's like, and it's just, and then it causes completely different symptoms. So it's like, it's just such an interesting thing. I think supplements, we rely on them too much and we look at them with such a zest. We're like, look at all these bottles that I have, as if that having a level of multivitamins makes you look healthy. To me, what looks healthy is when you don't have any bottles and you're like, look at all these vegetables and fruits that I have in my fridge, and like all this like grass-fed meat, like that, then you're like, you're good. Like
Yeah.
I'm not surprised by you. Like looks like you just know it in different people as opposed to, and it's not their fault. It's like, it's because we've been like, try this, do this. So we forget once again to listen to our bodies, and we begin to listen to the commercials that encourage us to get a particular vitamins. But the vitamins also have like, they can kick back effect. And they're called supplements because you meant to supplement them for a little bit if you need to up your levels. It's never one of those things that you should take forever. Like I had to take iron supplements, and I know that sometimes I just need to bring them in, and I usually feel it in my body, and I'll bring it in for like a month and then I'll take it out again. And
Mm.
it's meant to bring up for a bit, help you raise the levels, sort of like get it off again. And you don't have to test it all the time necessarily. That's the kind of like tuning into your body, but you kind of have to get to the level where you're able to. It's not that hard. When you feel good, you feel good. When you feel always tired, you feel always tired. And
Yeah.
women's reflex to that is often like chocolate, coffee, which actually just raises our stress levels and keeps us in this like shaky alert state, as opposed to supporting with nutrition and staying a
Mm.
bit more flat. It's all very simple, but it's not very easy sometimes to wrap your head around it with all the conflicting info out there.
Yeah. Yeah, but I'm very
Mm.
happy with this introduction to, to the cycles, to the seasons, to nutrition, to how when we pay attention to everything, actually there are solutions that are very easy to obtain. Just needing to ask the questions and get the conversation going. So
Yeah,
it's brilliant.
absolutely. And like your body wants to be healthy. And the symptoms like the fatigue, the brain fog, the migraines, it's mirror like, hey, pay attention to me, something is going on. And then your role from there on is just be like, okay, what's going, let's get to the root cause of it. Why am I having this insane migraines every single cycle? And just also for women within reproductive years is tracking your cycle and understanding that you like, it'll show up in cycles, it'll come in again, and like actually knowing when your symptoms come in, it's a great tool to bring to your doctor and actually be like, listen, this is what I've tracked on day 24, I become this and this, and like, and then you kind of have to help your medical professional because they only have 10 minutes.
Yeah,
They
like,
only have 10 minutes to help you, so you have to like almost go for super ready, but we just show up and we hope that figure it out. Like, tell
yeah.
me what's wrong. Here's the pill, which is what happens often.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, that was amazing conversation. Thank you so much for joining me and for
yeah,
helping me and others to understand a little bit more about our cycles and our seasons. Thank you. Thank you very much.
amazing. I really hope it was helpful. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, it was very helpful to me personally.
Amazing. Great.
Okay. Thank you very much. And thank you for everyone watching the replay and the live. See you soon. Bye.
Bye.